Alex?
Yes, Sarah?
If you had a poly time machine, what would you use it for?
I would probably go back and behave so perfectly that nobody would ever have an excuse to break up with me.
Oh.
What about you?
Political assassinations. Welcome to Mistakes Were Made. We're a podcast about non-monogamy for messy people like us. I'm Sarah. I'm queer, non-monogamous, a therapist, a parent, a writer, and I was totally joking just a few minutes ago.
I'm her husband, co-host, and actually a FBI sleeper agent who's been tracking your political behavior for the last 25 years.
Whoa, you're a honeypot.
Yeah.
Totally.
I've always wanted to be called a honeypot. Thank you.
You are. You're totally a honeypot. Cute.
I'm Jessica, a resident monogamist, and I don't know. I really thought one of you was going to say you would go back in time and make out with Abraham Lincoln.
I mean, making out with me is sort of like making out.
I was going to say, a close second. You all were the exact same height, right?
Yeah, I need a chin strap beard.
I've been saying that for years.
I should put that on my dating profile, actually. I did dress like Abraham Lincoln for Halloween one year, too.
That was the Halloween that I dressed like a newsie, and you dressed like Abraham Lincoln, and we got drunk and made out at a party, and everybody took pictures.
Yeah. Very nice.
So, anyway, speaking of time machines.
So if I had a time machine, I would go back to that party and just do that exactly the same way again. Relive that moment.
Did it right the first time.
Okay, so, but why a poly time machine? Because it's time to head back to the summer of 2020. Trump is in office, the streets are roiling with dissent, and Sarah and Alex have decided that what this turmoil needs is 2 more chaotic sluts. So basically, it's exactly the same as the summer of 2025, except we're 5 years older, 5 years hotter, and 5 years more revolutionary, I guess.
I like that. 5 years hotter, yeah.
Let's see, what else? Oh, but that doesn't explain the time machine. Right. So we're going back to 2020 because we all just moved. All three of us just moved, and in the process of moving out of our last place, which we had lived in for 15 years, I found a cute little green Tupperware in the bottom of my underwear drawer.
Weird.
What did it have in it?
And I'm going to shake it for this is the Foley, right?
ASMR.
Alex, do you remember this?
I do remember that, yeah.
What do you remember about this?
I remember that we went on a getaway for your birthday to Vashon Island, to a cute little house with a hot tub.
You were dressed like Abraham Lincoln. I was just dressed like a newsie.
I mean, as usual. Do we even need to?
Yeah, how often do you guys do that? Date night once a week.
Pretty much, yeah. So every year, Sarah's birthday present is me.
It's just the gift that keeps on giving.
No, I was not. And it was like, it would have been like 6 months after we opened our marriage, I think.
Yeah, almost like exactly.
That. And we went on a little retreat to Vashon Island, for your birthday. And we did like a cute little exercise, a team building exercise, where we wrote down a bunch of questions that we had for each other about sort of like what we wanted out of polyamory, and what it was going to be like, and sort of like different scenarios. I can't exactly remember, but
right. And it was like our fears and things that we were curious about, and questions we had for each other. I actually used incredible restraint here. I picked this up out of my underwear drawer, opened it up, took out one, saw what it was, immediately put it back and sealed it up because I was like, this is going to be good for the podcast, and I don't want us to actually know what's in here. So I have not looked at these in 5 years.
This is so exciting, you guys.
I knew you were gonna like this, Jess.
It's like a time capsule.
Yeah, this is like, I'm sure you guys have seen the meme that is frequently posted on Instagram where it's like, growing up, I really thought time capsules were going to be a bigger part of my adult life. And this is like, you're making that dream come true. This is so exciting.
Okay, good. This is really for you.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember some other details about that trip. We definitely did the questions like in the hot tub at one point.
Yeah.
Hot.
We also played Jenga at one point.
I remember that too.
That was exciting. And we wrote a song.
That was the trip we wrote our first song together.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That song was bad.
It was bad.
Yeah.
That's right. And I think I wrote the first like proto draft of an essay about non-monogamy, like also really, really bad.
Cool.
So hopefully those aren't hiding out in our underwear drawer anywhere.
What I'm hearing here is that this is a poly hot tub time machine episode, actually.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Oh, yeah.
And I'm curious, like, what was your state of mind? Like, what kind of like spurred this?
I can't really remember kind of where we were at. I mean, 6 months seems like so short, given that we're at like the 5-year mark now. But I remember feeling like it had been a long time already. Like things, it definitely didn't feel like we're just starting kind of vibe. Like a lot of shit had happened already, I think.
Well, as I mentioned, we were chaotic sluts right out the gate. So
Love it.
we had collected plenty of material by 6 months in.
Yeah, and like summer of 2020 was just like so crazy. So much was going on.
To set the stage, like we lived half a mile away from the CHOP, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, Chaz CHOP. And so everything that was happening at that police precinct that had been like taken over by protesters was essentially happening in our neighborhood too. So it was just like we felt very much in the middle of that, and it was kind of timely for a helicopter to go overhead because there were just like helicopters overhead all the time. You could hear like flash bang grenades happening all the time. We were going up there constantly to protest or report.
Yeah. And otherwise just like glued to the live feeds. I remember a lot of that. And of course that was also like George Floyd was killed 2.5 months after the pandemic was declared. So that was also like we were in baby pandemic years.
Right.
That's fucking nuts.
Wild.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
okay. Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah. And then we were like on fucking dating apps too.
Right. And then on Juneteenth of 2020 is also when my husband Curtis had his stroke. So then he was in the hospital and I was along with him for 3 months.
Oh my God.
By yourself, because none of us could go to the hospital.
And no one else was allowed to go to the hospital because of the pandemic.
And he had been really involved in the protests and like the CHOP and stuff. Because I remember I was like writing articles at the time and I would print them out and send them with you to the hospital so that you could like, or I was like writing him updates or something.
I know. And I was just thinking about this last week too, that like he and I got into some kind of argument about gas masks like around that time. Cause he really like admired people that showed up to the protest, like super geared up. And I think I had some reaction where I was like, we shouldn't have gear that like not everyone can have. I was like having, I don't know. Now I'm like, I don't know why I felt so strongly about it, but I was distressed and we got in a fight about it. And whatever. And then he had a stroke and I didn't think about it. But at some point, like while he was in the hospital, this box arrived that he had ordered before. And I didn't open it for like months and months and months, I don't think. But eventually I did. And I was like, oh, it's a gas mask. It's the gas mask that we fought about. And I kind of was like pissed for a second. And then I was like, oh, it's 2 gas masks. And those gas masks have since, like they actually were on the ground during George Floyd uprisings. I think you used one. I think it was then, or maybe it was later. And they also have been on the ground more recently.
Yep, that's right.
And they are very much a community resource.
All right, Curtis, you were right. You happy?
You were right. Sorry.
We should just turn this into a gas mask rating podcast.
Ooh, yeah.
But yeah, so it was tumultuous, and it was a really wild moment, kind of at every level. What do you remember about it?
I remember, like, I guess related to the dating stuff, like sort of it being like, because there was so much trauma, there's so much dramatic political stuff happening, so much trauma collectively around the pandemic, but also like that sort of just only reflected like internally because you were in such tight knit groups. And then the like trauma of the stroke as well. I remember like going out and meeting other people and being able to kind of like talk about that stuff with people like outside of the inner circle was actually really sort of helpful. And I think one of the things that attracted me to it is like, you know, there's that thing about concentric circles of receiving trauma or whatever. And
Care.
Of care, yeah.
Yeah. And that being able to like direct inward towards the more like the people who are more acutely experiencing the crisis.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. And then turn outward with the hard parts.
That's right. Yeah. So I think polyamory in a lot of ways just was like throwing some more chaos on the chaos pile. And it was helping in the sense that it was giving our community like some more resources almost, you know, like it was growing capacity in the sense that we could encounter and connect with other people at a time when everything felt really isolated.
Yeah, and I guess the sort of like broader framing for all of this is like these are the questions of people who are like opening a pretty long marriage for the first time. So it's maybe not like relative to people who are solo poly or relative to people who are, you know, don't have a primary partnership or people who have tons of experience. We're kind of like looking at like, how did that change? Like, how did the things that we thought were going to be questions at very close to the beginning change over the course of 5 years?
Yes. So this is going to be very specifically relevant to us and also to people who have been in a monogamous relationship for a long time.
And I think we have a lot of people who listen to this podcast who are in that kind of similar place where they're like considering opening a primary partnership or a long-term monogamous relationship or have just done so and are kind of trying to like figure out how to navigate that. So I guess the message here is this is something that you have to attend to and then you never maybe really solve exactly. Okay, so should we dig into the green Tupperware?
I think it's time. All right, I'm going to see if we can capture the opening of the Tupperware.
Okay.
Yeah, good. Ooh, great. We're going to also put that on a ASMR channel.
I wanted like the shrieking of 1,000 souls.
Pandora's box is now open.
Okay, so do you want to go first?
Did you guys both write on them? I can only see Sarah's handwriting from
I can
here.
see both. Yeah.
Okay.
As ever, probably there's more from me.
Are you reading mine and I'm reading yours or vice versa? What's the format here?
That's a good question. I think maybe let's just pull one out and see how it feels. Okay, I'm pulling out the first one. How do we keep special time for our relationship? How much of it do we need?
Is that your question, Sarah?
This is Alex's.
Yeah, I feel like this is still a thing that we talk about. Like we were literally talking about this like 3 days ago or like a couple weeks ago. It's a great question. Kudos to my 39-year-old self. Genius. And
I would say like as a therapist to people who are opening up often for the first time, this is a question that comes up a lot. Like, how do we keep something special for us? How much do you need? How much should it be structured?
Right. I mean, I think one of the big challenges is that like, as you open a relationship, you both like lose time in that you're spending time with other people, but then you also need more time in that like you have more to attend to in that relationship to like nurture it.
Yeah, I was thinking about how it's changed. I believe in the beginning, and I think this is maybe mirrored by other couples who are opening up, there's a sense of having like a lot of rules about that or like a lot of structure around it. Like you can only go out this many times or we need to go out in this many times in relationship to how many times you go out with other people, you know? And I think, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I know that there's a sense that any kind of rules or agreements are kind of a bad idea or going to get broken. And I also think that in the beginning of anything, you sort of need guardrails so that you can try things out, right?
I don't think rules in general are necessarily, like, rules about feelings are destined to fail. Rules about like structure are, I think, need to be constantly like sort of interrogated and reevaluated. And you certainly don't want to get into a place where you're like, but you setting your partner, like, but you said we were going to do this and now it's changing. Like things are going to change. And so you can't really hold it against people. But I think having a guidepost for like, we want to go on a date, just the two of us every month or something like that. Or like, you know, I think that's an appropriate and perhaps even wise thing to do.
Yeah, I think you're right. Maybe where it gets complicated is where you think that you're going to be able to impose those rules on other people, like outside of the relationship. Right. One of the things that is floating back to me now that I'm remembering is there being like other partners being like, okay, Monday is going to be the night that you go out with this person. Right. And Wednesday is going to be the night I go out with this person. And you also have to remember, I mean, we were silly and ridiculous, but we had really small kids.
Yeah.
5 years ago, we had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. So there was a lot of like stuff around childcare at that time, which was just really labor intensive. And then we'd be like, okay, we've got it all worked out. And then you'd like go to your partner and she'd be like, well, that day works for me next week, but then it's not going to work for me for the next 3 months. Yes. And I was like, damn it. Yeah. But we had a whole plan.
Well, and speaking of kids, like special time for your relationship is like certainly kids don't help unless you consider hanging out with kids. Special time for your relationship.
We clearly don't.
Special time for that relationship, maybe. But
I'm glad you brought that up because I think one of the things that has emerged for me over the course of 5 years is just like the complexity of our relationships in general. But like if you're thinking about ours, there's the kind of administrative element of our relationship. There's the domestic element of our relationship. There's the parenting, co-parenting element of our relationship. There's creative, there's sexual, there's romantic, there's in community, and
there's business,
which is just a euphemism for sex.
Yeah. Two different things, though.
But I think polyamory helped me understand that we had all of those like elements going on in our relationship and they weren't all collapsed on top of each other in this kind of invisible way. And that's cool and helpful. And maybe is one of the ways that my answer to this question about special time in our relationship has evolved, where I'm like, well, making a podcast together is special time. Going on a group camping trip with our kids and all their friends is special time. Doing our community dinners on Sunday night is special time. And also there are these areas of like romantic or, you know, learning new things together that can be like harder to attend to and you have to work a little harder to make that stuff happen.
Yeah. And there's maybe a certain kind of energy that you like exhaust on other relationships if you're not intentional about it.
I mean, I would say that has continuously been the source of most of my jealousy over the course of the last 5 years is just like you doing romantic things or like experiencing new things with other people and feeling like I really, really have to fight for that time for the two of us. I think that's hard.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Should we do another one?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
What are some ways we can keep things special between us? So basically the same one.
Clearly both concerned about that. Okay,
Is that what all of the pieces of paper say, you guys?
over and over again.
All right, do another one. Okay, wait, maybe one more thing I wanted to say since it came back up. Speaking of that camping trip and like being with a bunch of presumably monogamous couples. I don't know for sure, but we didn't talk about it.
This past weekend.
It is like when I think about the monogamous couples, especially parents that I know, I don't really know how like they answer this kind of question or how they think about it. And my impression is that like people don't work very hard. People with children specifically, I guess, and you can speak to people without children, maybe Jessica, but like, you know, you'll talk to people and it's like they go on a trip together once every 3 years or something like that, or like go on a date once every few months, maybe. Like that seems kind of like the standard for sort of middle-aged monogamous parents.
Yeah, I was thinking that too, that there is, in the same way that polyamory helped me see all of the facets of our relationship a little more clearly, it also, I don't know how else to put this except to say I realized I couldn't take anything for granted. You know, that like if I wanted my co-parent and I to also have a romantic relationship, I was going to have to proactively work for that. And that wasn't something that was just going to manifest and take care of itself.
Yeah.
Which I think is one of the things that helps I think that's one of the ways that polyamory keeps our relationship healthy. Yeah. Actually. In a kind of counterintuitive way. What do you think, Jess?
Yeah, I was thinking about it's like hard to create special time in all relationships, I think. I mean, I'm sure it's more hard when you have kids, but like, you know, I'm monogamously married and don't have children, but like a lot of time it's just like life, even though like technically me and Curtis have a lot of time where it's just the two of us. A lot of it is not special time. Right. You know?
Yeah. Well, it's like, what do you define as special time? Like you guys go to movies all the time and I'm like,
right. Yeah.
That seems so special. Like when was the last time you and I went to a movie?
Like 8 months ago, but who's counting?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We went to 2 movies yesterday. Holy shit, dude. I know it's fucked up.
Yeah. Right.
But also then it's just like, I guess by definition, stuff is sort of like not special except for the things that are a little bit rarer and harder to get. So it's not like we're, you know, I mean, it's lovely to go to the movies. Don't get me wrong at all. But it's not like we're sort of deepening our relationship or like, you know, connecting on really special levels. It just takes a lot of like intentionality and time and energy and, you know,
and a desire to do it.
Yeah.
And for something to be defined as special, it has to be like sort of compared to something else. And I think to your point, like polyamory kind of provides that. Like you're like, oh, that's the special time that you're doing with that person. So then we kind of know what it would be over here because, you know, it's what you're doing with somebody else.
It's also, I mean, this is maybe a funny reflection and possibly a drag on us, but we'll see how it plays out. You and I have always created scenarios where time, just the two of us, is somewhat scarce. Even before we had children, we always lived in communal houses.
Right.
You know, we were often, when we were international journalists, we were like traveling with teams of people and like, you know, not that we didn't get a chance to do those things, but it was never the default that you and I were just like living domestically, the two of us together alone.
That's a good point.
And I think that's interesting, and I think it's unusual. I mean, we probably only lived just the two of us. In the upstairs apartment?
It was like dramatic when we moved upstairs, and it was, you know, only 2 years or something.
2 years before Malcolm was born.
You were like, we better make another person.
We're like, it's not crowded enough.
So then it creates like a date culture kind of that we have.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
That we're like going out away to get kind of like get special time with ourselves, especially if you live with other people. Then you're like, well, we need to go out to like get togetherness time. Yeah, which is great. I love that.
Me too.
Yeah. Should I do another one or?
Yeah, do another one.
Because that one didn't count.
Nah.
Okay. This one is. How do we create time just for? No, I'm just kidding. When would we might? Oh, this is ripped in half, so I don't know what it said. But I'm going to read it just to see if we can decipher it. When would we might with someone that feels supportive and fun for all? Nope.
Is this the other half?
Oh.
Why is it torn in half?
I don't know.
Oh. Oh, when would you imagine we might sleep over with someone, and how can that feel supportive and fun for all? Okay, so
wow.
At this point, we had never slept over with another person.
Interesting. Yeah.
That is interesting.
So should I answer, or are we answering this in the now?
Well, then
We might quite often.
maybe just even before you do, like, I think it's interesting coming back to like some of the rules. I think that people frequently, like, I feel like that is a super common rule that I hear people talk about, like no sleepovers or no partners in our bed or whatever. Like that seems like both cliche and also in real life.
I think we've gone through a few cycles of that, right? Like we, at this point, I guess, hadn't done it. And then I started sleeping over with a partner that I had at that time, or maybe the same time that you did with another one that you had.
Good
You're shaking your head now.
Yeah, must have been.
And
must have been, yeah.
We sort of, those relationships ended and we stopped for a while.
Because we were also sleeping over at their houses like once a week.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like a lot. And I remember, I think that at the time, that decision felt like, it was just like, especially when the kids were smaller, it was like they get up so early and you're just like losing so much time the next day that like you would come back together at like noon or 1, you know, say it's like you sleep over on Friday and then Saturday, it's just like most of the day is gone. And it almost kind of felt like it wasn't like, it sort of wasn't worth it, or like,
well, because the resentment levels were so high.
Yeah.
If you could read between the lines here, I think that's what you're trying to say.
I definitely remember having some resentment about that for sure. But
because if you were just saying at this time you had a 2-year-old and a
4-year-old.
So that is until 1 p.m. is like a whole
and you're trying
lifetime
to get
of
out of the house
parenting,
and do something.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Also, I'm just realizing we were both in grad school.
Oh my God, you
That too,
guys.
And we both had jobs. I was
Yeah.
working at that civil rights organization.
yeah,
What the fuck?
I don't know.
Ew. That was
You.
Just-
Why is it you?
that's too much. I mean, I'm just looking back
The
on
sleeping
it.
over part, or just being poly?
No, just everything that we
Life.
were doing.
Yeah.
Like, I can see now in retrospect, looking at these questions and kind of putting myself back in that headspace, that life was kind of untenable. And I think polyamory was in part a way to get away from a life that felt untenable, but then added a layer of like it feeling stressful and not really sustainable on top of it. I mean, I'm definitely remembering that this was an incredibly stressful time.
So how would you advise somebody who was just opening a relationship contemplating this question about sleepovers?
Well, I mean, I think one of my first pieces of advice would be the other people you're dating, talk to them about how important it is and be honest up front about like whether or not you might be moving slowly on that. Because I do think that this can become like a point of tension between people pretty quickly. And for some people, sleeping over is just like a really important part of any intimate relationship.
And is almost like assumed.
And
like,
assumed.
Some people are like, if I'm sleeping with somebody, quote unquote, like having sex with somebody, I'm probably sleeping with them.
Right. Yeah. And so I think having conversations up front about that and like making sure that people understand that maybe you're in another partnership where it's going to be slower moving, or maybe you're not sure how you feel about that, or if you have kids that the considerations might be different.
Yeah.
So that people, I don't know, can kind of opt in and also build a container that can kind of make space for people being at different speeds there.
Yeah.
I also would just say most people, the first couple of times of doing that, their partner being gone, if they live together and they don't have experience with this, it's really stressful.
Well, and then
I think-
sometimes it's stressful for the person who's doing it too.
Well, yeah. It's always stressful for me. Everything's stressful for me. Whatever.
Yeah, for me too. It's like it's something you have to get used to a little bit. I think if you haven't done it for a long time, just being in another person's house, another person's environment, and like it's like a high level of intimacy that you just like wouldn't. It's like more intimate than sex in some ways.
Yeah, I think the parent guilt is pretty strong works pretty hard on me in this department too. Even if I don't fully understand that that's happening below the surface, it almost always is. That I'm just like aware that I'm kind of doing something that is unusual. The kids know where I am. My co-parent is like out there doing all of this domestic stuff.
Your co-parent's at home being like, Mom's not here.
She's with her boyfriend.
She's sleeping at her boyfriend's house.
Oh, you want Mom? Well, I want Mom too, but we don't get to have Mom. Okay? Because it's the boyfriend's night. Obviously, none of that is actually happening. Rhetorically, but I think sometimes
definitely not.
sometimes it does like feel like that, or there's just like a judgment.
Mom's out sucking dicks.
Oh my god! I knew you had one more in you.
Yeah, I did.
There was no way.
Jessica's making a note to edit that part out.
Anyway,
I've never said that. I swear.
So. Yeah, I think that it can be hard in that respect. I think it's okay for it to be hard. I think this is probably like one of those early lessons of just being like, you're having a different type of relationship than a typically escalating monogamous relationship where like this is, you do this and then you do this more and then you do this until you move in. Like that's not the escalator you're on. And so I think recognizing that early on and really being able to talk about it throughout is helpful for just like keeping a gut check on what kind of relationships you're actually building. Yeah.
And I don't want to speak too broadly, but I do think that to your point about what the other partners want, it does create it's like a limitation that people will feel. And like, I think when we moved out of that first phase of sleeping over with people and like the relationships that I built in that phase where I was like, I don't do this ever. It was like, even if it wasn't a sort of thing that people necessarily like, that I was dating necessarily like voiced their unhappiness about it, it's still like, you can feel that. I would say that period where we didn't do it at all didn't last for very long. Yeah, because we started going on trips with other people. And then, some people are just, it's like a deal breaker for them. Yeah. That's the thing. I think for me, generally, the conclusion that I have is this is another thing that makes it hard for people with children to date people without children. Yeah. Because they don't understand it in the same way. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. The question, though, was like, how could it be supportive? So a few things I've noticed that I think are helpful is having really clear communication around expectations with everybody involved. So it's like, when are you coming back? Will I hear from you at all between the time you leave and the time you come back? Right. A good night text is solid. Just, are you going to do that or not? I think just really being clear about communication around that is really important. And then in the beginning, I think, just like when you're not used to going on dates with other people and coming back to another relationship or receiving someone who's just gone on a date with someone else, there's usually like a little readjustment period, especially in the beginning as you're kind of getting used to having a different type of relationship where you have to like have some time to reconnect. And you can't just like slam right back into your life and relationship. And there's something about spending the night apart, I think like going to sleep and then waking up that like makes that some real distance that you have to like reconnect around. Yeah. So those are like maybe the tips that I would offer. And just like, it's okay that this is kind of like I think it's like a standard flashpoint for non-monogamous people. And I think that's okay. And I don't know that it can necessarily be resolved. I think it's just like kind of part of the tension of having relationships that don't have exclusivity and don't like march through stages in a predictable way. Yeah. I'm going to assume that one was ripped in half just because we were being dramatic and we talked about it and then I can picture you just never going to happen.
Is that when you guys wrote these questions, did you answer them at the time?
Yeah. I think so, yeah. Oh, that's cute. What I remember too. Let's see, what do we have here? Honestly, these are just the same question. Really? Ask like 14 different ways. If I had read these ahead of time, I would have known that. Can we date and still keep our relationship at the center logistically and emotionally and romantically? I mean, that's a slightly different question because it is about hierarchy. Right. And how we were thinking about that 5 years ago and how we think about it now. Yeah. At the center logistically. I mean...
Alex is like, ooh, logistics.
Logistics. No, I'm interested.
There's nothing more romantic to Alex than logistics.
I would say our relationship definitely is at the center logistically still.
No shit.
And probably romantically and emotionally as well.
But I think that maybe there's something in the language of this that belies a different point of view. Like 5 years ago, I would have assumed that had to be really, really tightly and strictly preserved.
Right.
And that any release on that grip of like a primary relationship being centered romantically and emotionally and logistically would be threatening. And I don't feel that way anymore, even if like functionally.
Yeah. I think at this time of
true.
writing, we would have identified ourselves as non-monogamous and not polyamorous.
That's
I think
right.
that's probably one of the sort of a key difference.
And what has changed? And when?
You know, that we've accepted what you just said, that like, that our relationship will not always be centered in all of these ways. And I think that's more of a poly approach than a non-monogamy approach. I don't really know what non-monogamy even means.
I mean, I think it's a big umbrella term.
Right.
But also I think people sometimes use it to describe like not having romantic and like emotionally involved, committed or attached relationships.
Yeah.
And I think in the beginning, I had no idea what I was talking about or what I was doing. And so I imagined that there were these like containers of little satellite relationships that we could have that would be sort of siloed away safely and not touch the rest of our lives. And that blew up pretty quickly. It's just like, you know, people fall in love, people grow attached, relationships change. People get to know each other. What's happening in one relationship is influencing what's happening in another.
Yeah.
You just recognize.
Well, you have to work really hard to keep the people from meeting each other. Like, I think that changed a fair amount.
Tell me more about that.
Just like, I don't know if this is in the mix in the other questions to come, but like, just like the thought that you would not meet your metas. I think a lot of people like go into it thinking that might be a possibility, or like, I don't want to do that. And it's like, I think longer term, it's just pretty impractical. Like you just, because you end up having this like really important perisocial relationship with this other person that's entirely going through your partner. And that's just like a huge burden on maybe both of you, maybe all three of you. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree. I think I pretty early on wanted to meet your partners and did more of it than you did meeting mine.
Yeah, more quantity. I don't think you had very many partners that I just never met.
No, but I did it like earlier on and more
Yeah.
frequently and had more like crossover
Right.
connections and community relationships with them. So that was probably my first step away from non-monogamy and towards polyamory too, where I'm just like, I'm so systems oriented, I'm so community minded that even though initially in this like little question asking phase, the idea of like siloed satellite relationships felt safer, almost immediately it was clear that they didn't actually feel safer and I was incapable of doing that.
Yeah.
And that it felt more functional and more fun and safer to know people if they wanted to do that too.
Yeah. And I think in retrospect, I find it a lot easier. I like much prefer to have met, like just generally from like a jealousy standpoint or whatever, somebody that I've met is always less threatening than somebody who I haven't.
Yeah. So I think like the spirit of this question is interesting. You know, can we date and still keep our relationships at the center, not just logistically, but romantically and emotionally? Can we date? Just in and of itself reveals some naivete. It's like, you're not just dating, you're having relationships with other people. And I think like it just makes me realize how much more complex and nuanced and kind of sophisticated polyamorous relationships are than I would have realized at that time. You know, it's not like for us, it's not like your tennis buddy, you know?
Yeah. I always want to be fucking my tennis buddies.
I know that's also true.
Yeah. It's, I mean, I also think that like the 5-year distance from having written that is interesting to the extent that we have done that too. You know, I think some people might like be opening a marriage, like looking to 5 years down the road, might be like concerned or be like, oh, this is like almost certainly going to like change the fundamentals of our relationship. And like, you know, here we are, like we just moved into a new house together. Like our relationship, as much as it has like transformed in some ways, is still very much the same relationship that it was in terms of its like primacy and stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like the form of our lives demands that, right? We co-parent together, we own property together, we like run a bunch of things together. And so there's not like a relationship that's going to come in and...
Right. But we've like decided to own new property together
we have,
and things like that. Like those are decisions. It's not...
Yeah, I guess I'm just like a little... I'm feeling some pushback against this idea of like the primacy of our relationship has not changed. And I'm like, I feel like it has, honestly. I feel like 5 years ago, there was an assumption that like certain types of feelings and experiences and prioritizing would only happen between the two of us.
Right.
And that has profoundly changed. You know, I don't think there's a single point on that little spectrum that I was imagining at the time that hasn't changed.
Yeah. But, you know, there also have been, you know, like 10 or 15 people who have like sort of we've been in relationships with during that time. And, you know, only a handful of those people are like still in our lives. So like in that sense, we are the thing that has stayed constant.
That's true. Right. Our relationship has not broken up.
Right.
Well, whereas the other relationships we've been in have.
Yeah.
Although at this point, you and I are both in relationships that are multi-year long relationships.
Yeah.
So that's worth saying too, that the relationships themselves have kind of grown longer over the course of those 5 years. You know, the arcs.
Yeah. Interesting.
Okay, fascinating. We're fascinating. All right, what else you got?
I'm supposed to be finding yours. Oh, yeah. Do we always want to meet partners? And what if they don't want to meet us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have feelings about this
I wonder
one.
what we said at the time. What do you think we said at the time?
I think I probably would have said I always want to meet partners.
Yeah. Yeah, I probably did too. I can't remember ever like working to not meet one of your partners. You know? And still, same. What if they don't want to meet us? I don't know that that's ever come up. Have you ever dated anybody who was like, absolutely not?
Let me think about it. Nope.
Yeah.
I think that would be a red flag for me. Not because I am disrespectful of people having that boundary, but I think for just the way I am and we are, it's hard to imagine that working in a long-term way.
No.
Right. Yeah.
You guys, I think I can think of at least one example where a partner's partner did not want to meet you. Is that true?
Yes. I am definitely have had that experience.
Yeah.
Right. A partner's partner. Yeah.
And I guess you have a lot less.
I've actually had that experience a number of times.
Interesting.
I'm realizing. Have you, Alex?
I'm supposed to this week be meeting a partner's partner for the first time, and it's somebody that they've been dating for like probably almost a year, and so have I. So we've had like a many months long like parallel relationship or like hinge relationship, I guess.
But it's not like this person, also known as a metamor, didn't want to meet you.
No, it just hasn't kind of happened yet.
But it's not like a policy. See, that feels different. Like I have been in a couple of relationships where my partner's partners or metamors, as a policy, don't want to meet me.
Yeah.
Also don't want to hear anything about me. Also would just rather I didn't exist.
Right. Yeah.
So that's cool.
Has that been the case in more than one relationship that you've had?
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. I wonder.
And once with a man and woman partner, and once with a woman and a man partner. So in all of those gender permutations.
Because like then you would perhaps interpret that as like you are somehow intrinsically threatening, but that's never been the case for my part. I feel like a lot of the people that I date, especially when we've been making the podcast, at least on some level, are very fascinated with you and like already know who you are, and like
Right.
are
So
like,
they have like a parasocial relationship with us.
and they're just dating me to get to you. Honestly, that's the long game.
This one is a tough one, and it's kind of controversial, and so I don't want to like slip past it too quickly. I think this question of meeting partners is actually a pretty like big, complex one where people feel very differently about it. And it's interesting. We might be lucky in the sense that early on we were pretty aligned on that.
Yeah,
and
you've seen it come up with clients as like a...
I see it come up with clients a lot, and that there will just be like really different ideas about like comfort levels around that and how much people want to like know about or kind of be exposed to other partners. And I think having distance between you on that particular topic can be really challenging to navigate.
Yeah. I think I'm willing to go bold and just say that meeting your partners, if they're ongoing relationships, is just something that you should do. And like, it's not as much of a question of personal preference. Like, I think you will suffer more if you try to never do that.
Why do you say that?
Because, it's like past a certain point of familiarity. It's just like your partner is out there like building this whole thing with this mystery person who you're only going to know. I actually have a partner now who, like set this boundary with her husband when they first started dating, or when he first started dating. She had been for a little while, and she was like, I don't ever want to meet her. And like a few months ago, after like 2 years, she finally did. And she was like, oh, I don't know why I was doing that. It was like very stupid. And there was like a bunch of kind of, I think, unneeded strife in the relationship because they hadn't met each other. And just like, I think it maybe also points to like a fundamental discomfort with, who the other person is. It's almost like passively sort of judgmental. Like you think that you're not going to like them. Just an aversion to sharing space with a person in general is like,
feels competitive.
It's like a little bit toxic in some ways. Like it's gonna create like a bad feelings, I think.
I agree. I'm willing to go out on this limb with you and say, like, if you feel really committed to the idea of like non-monogamy over polyamory, and you're just like, I go out and have physical sexual relationships, but we don't have like falling in love, committed, attached relationships, maybe this could work. Just like not meeting other partners. I don't know, because we've never really tried that. And I think I have known that to kind of work. I don't know if as a policy it would. I'm thinking about couples I know who are open for a long time and just in a sex way, not in a feelings way. But I think even then they're kind of like in community, so that like sometimes you do share space with the person because you like might end up at the same bar or the same meetup or the same party, But I agree with you. I think if you're having committed, emotional, romantic, attached relationships, it's going to cause a lot of suffering and challenge if you just have a policy of not meeting the other people.
Which is not to say it's not going to be hard when you do. But it's just like you're putting off some hard thing and making things harder by not wanting to do, a smaller hard thing.
And it's just by its nature, it can be a kind of dehumanizing thing to do. So it's like that person then becomes a projection of your worst fears, usually.
Okay, should we do a lightning round?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to set a timer. 1 minute. All right. Go.
All right.
And you can skip.
Oh my God. Are we comfortable with romantic feelings for other partners?
Yeah. Pretty much the same. Okay. What do you think about veto power, and what is something you might veto? Oh, this is good. I think there are valid vetoes.
Tell me more. We're going to need more than a minute for this.
Yeah, pause the lightning round.
All right. Well, that's not how a lightning round works.
Well.
See, now I have to have a thoughtful answer. Yeah, valid vetoes. I'm trying to think of things that we would have vetoed. I mean, vetoing people. Well, like we have, like, I wouldn't call it a veto, but like we have like determined that it is better for us that I don't date people who are, 10 years younger. I don't think that's really your veto, but it's like, it could be.
Well, this, I think, is a challenging topic between the two of us because I, in no way have said that was a requirement of mine. I have, like, watched you come to the conclusion on your own over the course of these 5 years that it's better for you to date people that are closer to your age.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's a thing that could be, like, I'm trying to think of, like, things that are valid things that one might veto.
That's, yeah, I don't know. Ooh, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. I think I'm anti-veto. I think in the similar way that it's like, it just kind of has toxicity embedded in it. With the, like, I won't meet other partners. I think veto kind of just has toxicity embedded in it.
I mean, vetoing people, or what about vetoing things like certain, I don't know, unsafe sex practices?
Right.
Yes, that's a good
Boundaries
distinction.
versus vetoes.
Yeah.
Because also, like, I want to date your client.
Okay.
You veto that?
Well,
That's
no.
right. I see your point.
But like a category of people, well, client, but like, we've talked about the idea of like women who don't want to date women who date men, right?
Right.
Vetoing an entire category of people that way.
Or
right.
like vetoing like group sex.
Vetoing the other person from having group sex.
Yeah. See, okay, there are some distinctions here that I think matter. Because I think vetoing individual people is a disaster. And I do not think you should do that.
Yeah.
Because what I have noticed is my practice, and also anecdotally, is there's always a reason that person eventually gets vetoed. Like if someone is just uncomfortable with polyamory, their partner will develop something with a partner, and if there's veto power, at some point this uncomfortable person will veto. It's just a matter of time.
Right.
I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
It's not, I think it's bad practice for that reason. I also just think from the perspective of autonomy that you have to recognize that the people you are in relationship with actually have full autonomy to make their own decisions. You have full autonomy to make your own decisions about who you can be in relationship with. And so I think this is where it gets tricky. I would probably not be able to date a 45-year-old man who dated 20-year-olds.
Right.
Right? Like, if I'm being honest, that would just not work for me. It would make me uncomfortable in all of these different ways. And I would just kind of have to own that.
Right.
As my truth,
Yeah. Well, or to use the like client example, like presumably it's not like you're vetoing me dating your client. It's like you're explaining to me if I don't understand why that is a bad idea or why it is like unethical. Like you have to like sort of explain that to me.
Right.
And then I come to understand it. And that's not the same thing as a veto.
That's different. I mean, there's like, it's an ethical consideration. I think this is where like veto and ethical considerations are getting like conflated in an interesting and complex way. Because I think technically, is it a violation of my license? No, it wouldn't be, because I can't really control what you do, right? With dating a client of mine. And anyone who insisted on dating a client of mine, I would break up with.
Right. Well,
so that is a good example.
The exercise of a veto is ending the relationship.
Right. So I can see where this is really interesting to me, because I think maybe this word veto, which has a lot of carries a lot of weight in the polyamorous community, is not a very descriptive word because we don't actually know what we're talking about.
Right. I mean, you could argue that like an age gap relationship was an ethics violation as well.
That's what I was going to say.
Past an arbitrary, semi-arbitrary point, it like becomes illegal. It's
right.
And that's, I mean, I will own that this is just like a kind of ongoing area of discomfort and challenge for me around like big age gaps, especially between men and women, and like how challenging I find it to be in relationship with men who do that. And what is the difference between me owning that and that being true, and me having like thoughts and feelings about power and accountability, as well as just my own feelings about like aging and value.
Right.
And how much of that is just like, that's a kind of like bad behavior that I can't tolerate. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot going on there. And a lot of it is on my side, but some of it does feel like a reasonable boundary to have.
Yeah.
You know?
What we've never really run into this exactly, but like, what about when you like really don't like a person that your partner is dating? Like, or like this person is like, you know, you feel like they're dangerous or something like that. Like
the dangerous thing comes up a lot with my clients. Yeah. A lot of my clients will feel like a partner's partner is dangerous in like drug use, alcohol use, sex practices. Like that definitely does come up. And again, this is where like, are we talking about veto power? Or are we talking about my boundaries? Are we talking about like trying to stop you, Alex, from doing something? Or are we saying like, this is a limit to what like I personally feel comfortable with? I am expressing that to you. What you do next is up to you, you know? And it's like, I don't know. I honestly don't know.
But I think that example of like a dangerous partner is such a good one because it's so relatable too, to just think about friends. When I've had friends who are in relationships with people who like, I'm just like, I don't think this person is good for you. I think they're harmful in X, Y, and Z ways. It's like almost impossible, I think, to successfully just say that to a person unless it's like really close to a crisis point anyways, right? But you know, it's like what you can do is have conversations about how that relationship is making them feel, you know, and kind of support them to really understand that they deserve to not be harmed in their relationships, right? But it's not, you know, as a friend, I can't veto someone's partner.
This is challenging. This comes up a lot as a therapist, so a little bit of a roundabout way of addressing this, but maybe interesting. You might imagine how often I'll be with a client and they'll be struggling in a relationship and they'll say, okay, but for real, do you think I should break up with them?
Right.
Like probably once a week.
An individual client
will ask me like, what is your opinion?
Oh my God.
They're basically like, are you going to veto this person?
Like, veto.
Right? And what I typically say is if this is not an abusive situation, like a really physically dangerous situation, I am internally agnostic on this point because I think people are choosing to learn in their own ways through relationships. And so you're choosing to learn through staying. Maybe you're choosing to learn through leaving. Maybe you're choosing to learn through leaving and then going back and then leaving and then going back and then leaving and going back to the point of my fucking brain leaking out of my ears.
Your job there is the facilitator of their learning and growth.
Yes.
And it's like your business or whatever.
Right.
But if you're partnered with somebody who like is in such a relationship, then it's like gonna be a burden on your, you know, your relationship.
And that is hard. And I will say, you know, that does show up between the two of us. I can honestly say you have never dated someone that I didn't like. The reason why, though, is because I have an internal personal policy to always like the people I love's partners, right? Even before we were non-monogamous, you know, I'll use Jessica as an example here. Jessica has dated some people who, in retrospect, I liked better than other people. At the time, I was like, I like this person and hang out with them.
Is that a policy you can have? You try to.
Yes, that is what that's my goal.
Yeah.
That's my goal. Is that because I just feel like you lose when you put yourself in competition with other people's love. And because I want to respect people's choices. And like they're choosing to learn this way. And I also don't want to be the reason that they don't get that lesson, which sounds kind of self-serving when I say it out loud, but it's like, if you need to take this toxic bullshit relationship all the way to the end to know not to do it again, then fucking do that. I don't want to be the person that interrupted that so that we could just be back in this part of the cycle again a year and a half from now.
And maybe you just value your internal I told you so. You don't even have to have said
I'm playing the long game, motherfuckers. Yes, I am. Absolutely 100% I am playing the long game.
We should come back and do a whole episode about veto power, obviously.
Can I say one other thing, though?
Yes.
There have been times in your relationships with people, and really it's only been once or twice, where I felt like the way they were treating you was hurting you. And that was really hard.
Yeah.
And it is hard to watch that happen. And so I just want to acknowledge that I don't have like some total emotional remove there. And I did have opinions about them based on that.
Yeah. And I think I heard those opinions sometimes.
Really? I didn't keep them to myself.
Some of them. Usually after.
Usually after.
I already acknowledged the harm.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Next up.
Okay. Is this the lightning round now?
This is the lightning round.
All right,
This is the
let's
lightning
see.
round.
Let's see
For
how you
real.
do it.
Oh my God, what happens if one of us falls in love?
You're just skipping everyone.
Well, but
That
it's
did-
just
because we
just
already
to go fast, yes, but that did happen. I mean, falls in love, we've talked about like the terminology of falls and like losing your agency or whatever, but we have been in love with other people.
Right.
Clearly we thought when we wrote this that wasn't going to happen,
Which
or
is
like
hilarious.
it was a hypothetical. Happens all the time.
happens all the time. Happened 12 times.
Yeah.
I don't know. Last month.
Yeah. What is a way you imagine this looking 5 years from now? See this podcast.
drop the mic.
Okay. What makes our relationship special?
Oh. Yeah, see, it's the same question over and over again. Let's just see how many there are in
We're
there.
obsessed with that question.
Cute.
Oh my God.
What?
What if we meet someone with a nicer dick or pussy?
Oh.
What's that? Whose is that?
Yours.
Mine?
Good job.
Wow.
Good job.
Wow,
I
Alex.
just think we
Getting
almost
really
stopped.
real there.
I think there's one thing that I've learned in these 5 years, and it's that every dick and pussy is unique and special in its own way.
That's right.
There's no such thing as a nicer one.
Exactly.
It's a real ADAB, APAB. Beautiful being a bee.
All dicks are bastards.
All dicks are beautiful.
All dicks are beautiful. All pussies are beautiful. Absolutely. It also speaks to a different frame of mind where
Yeah.
there's just a lot of
Oh, it's so
supremacy, a lot of
sweet.
insecurity, a lot
Yeah.
of need for knowing that we're going to be special and the best to each other in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are cute.
What about when our parents find out?
Oh my God. I guess they hadn't found out by then.
No. The great news is
Cute.
they just fucking pretended they forgot immediately when they found out.
Well, that was yours.
Yeah. I mean, yours don't ever say anything about it.
Well, my parents called me in a panic because they found out from a friend who had read it on my website for my private practice that I was putting together, and then yelled and cried about it.
Wasn't it about you being queer?
Oh, no, that was about me being queer.
Yeah.
That was the part they
Yeah.
yelled and cried about.
We took them out to Thai
Then we
food.
took them out to Thai food, it must have been years later because it wasn't the pandemic anymore.
Yeah, it was not that much later. It was a long time ago now.
And told them that we were non-monogamous, and they were better about that. You're right. They were just like, well,
What? I can't remember what they
all
said.
our parents cheated on each other. Maybe it's okay. And we're
Yeah.
like, yeah, sure.
Basically what my parents said too.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
But then my parents pretended to forget a bunch of times.
Same, mine too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
How
Cool.
convenient.
Seems to be a common experience. Oh, here, you do this one.
Okay,
2 more.
2 more, last ones. Would we ever want to date in squares?
Oh,
In
cute.
squares.
I guess we must have
Like
meant
wife swapping.
or
Right.
like a foursome type situation, or wife swap. I don't know exactly what we meant by that.
Because didn't we kind of do that? Like right at the beginning, we dated
yeah.
the couple. Or like you dated, you started talking to the husband and then I started matched with the wife and then
It went sideways
I just
because-
slept with the wife and then you met the husband.
And then
we're
I met
"Nope."
the husband and left after the first drink. And then everything went to shit.
And then the wife got mad at me.
That's
about
right.
that.
So I'm
So I don't know what we were talking about here.
no.
Yeah, we must have been talking. Certainly
that's
people
what it
date in squares.
means to date in squares, right? Like where you're dating a couple as a couple.
But is it crossing all directions?
Oh,
You gotta hope so.
like going around and
Around and around.
Dating in a Union Jack.
Yeah, dating in a Union Jack formation. And the answer to any hot couples out there who are listening is sure, why not?
Yeah, we haven't ever actually done it. We've gone on dates with couples, and we've gone on dates with our partners, certainly.
Yeah.
But we haven't had sex with our partners.
No.
Or with a couple.
No.
No.
Yeah, it seems like you're just sort of like exponentially increasing the difficulty level, right? Like, considering how relatively challenging it can be to find a person that you like in one date, then it's like squared.
Yeah.
Right.
And then cubed or something.
Unless you
It's
stick
like,
to
then you
Sarah's
also have
policy
to,
of
like,
always
your
liking the people that your partner is
Oh,
dating.
right.
But I don't like them
But she
to the
doesn't
point
wanna
of wanting
fuck
to
them.
fuck them.
Necessarily.
No, that's a different kind of policy.
That's
Yeah.
again, it's exponential geometry here. It could happen, I'm sure.
This feels
Yeah.
like a check back in 5 years
Yeah,
type of
totally.
thing. You
yeah,
know?
we need a new
Yeah.
time capsule.
We have gone on dates with a lot of, like, not a lot, but a handful of times we've gone on dates with couples and it's never gone anywhere.
That's true.
So that's interesting.
Yet.
Yeah. Somebody could be the lucky first.
Dun, 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 dun.
Last one.
Enter to win. How would you imagine the kids finding out? Kids knowing and finding out.
Didn't know yet. Cute.
Yeah.
Well, because they were like, gaga, goo goo, we're
Right.
babies.
They really spoke.
I don't understand.
And now they're like in 4th grade. They're like, teacher, my mom's on a date with her boyfriend, and
Pretty much. Yeah, it's pretty normalized for them.
It's pretty normalized.
Like, we went away this weekend with a bunch of their friends, and I don't get the sense that, like, they talk about it to their friends to the extent that their friends' parents, not to the extent that their friends' parents, friends tell their parents and their parents acknowledge that they know to us, right?
yeah, but
My guess
They
is that
might
all of those
know.
parents know that we are polyamorous. Because
Okay.
some of them we've told, and I got the
Yes.
sense that one of them had listened to the podcast.
Uh-huh.
So I feel
Shout out.
like, hey, what's up? I see you. So I think that probably the rumor mill would have gotten around about that in some way, shape,
Yeah.
or form. Also, a lot of their friends' parents are polyamorous, or at least they have like 2 really close friends where that's the case, or 3.
If they all know, then why aren't they flirting with me more? I don't understand.
sad.
All the parents, because they're not polyamorous. They
Okay.
just know.
All right.
But then the kids will say like really weird shit. Like this weekend, they were talking about cheating, right?
Oh yeah, they're obsessed with cheating.
They're obsessed with
It's
cheating
like
right
the
now.
cheating narrative, cultural narrative is just like so powerful that it's like they don't even understand that it like kind of can exist in alongside polyamory. I mean, it can, but like, you know, they don't
Interesting.
they don't
were
see
like-
those things as exclusive somehow.
I know you and Dad are not cheating on each other, but aren't the people that you're dating cheating? Is basically what they were saying. And I was like, no, nobody's cheating. We're just, keeping busy.
Yeah.
That's good.
Wow.
Just
So-
keep him busy.
I was
good.
super stressed about that early on, about the
Yeah.
kids finding out. And I think part of me was like, well, maybe by the time it would matter, we won't be anymore. And it'll just be like an interesting blip in our history. But
Yeah.
now I feel so, at times I'll feel iffy about it. Like when we were on that camping trip, a couple of people asked me about my therapy practice. And they're like, so do you work with specific populations? And I had to like sort of force myself to list the populations and include polyamory and non-monogamy. I was just like, don't omit it, just say it,
Huh.
But it's still kind of on my mind.
Yeah,
sometimes.
it didn't come up
Yeah.
all weekend for me.
Yeah. Interesting.
I think polyamory is great for kids. The kids should be poly. That's my hot take. Think about all the
Kids
like,
are poly.
yeah, kids are. Like, think about all the like playground drama of like, like maybe they need to like play that shit out, but like a kid has a crush on one kid or like their little boyfriend and girlfriend, and then like they go and break up with them for another one, and just sad. They don't need to do that. Just date everybody.
It's funny though. I think it aligns with their development at that age because they do all this in-grouping, out-grouping, which is kind of
Right.
like developmentally what they're doing. So the like, we're dating, now we're not. We're best friends, now
Right.
we're not. You're, that all is kind of part of what they're experimenting with. But I hear you. I appreciate that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to lay the groundwork for the kids do know about the podcast, and they're always insisting that we should make a kids version.
Oh my God.
They are. And we're just like, well, what are you talking
What
about?
would that look
What
like?
would that
Yeah,
look like?
what would that look
They're just going to talk about mistakes that they made.
I mean, I am also really curious about kid relationships. you know, I would listen to a podcast.
I mean, kids'
where I'm just getting
friendships
the
are
kind of
super
rundown.
important, and they obviously like are poly with their friendships. Like, you know,
Yeah.
it's not like they have one best friend usually.
And they are really good. Like, it comes back to this idea that, like, in friendship context, when you're younger, there seems to be like a good, strong, healthy sense of like sharing and taking turns. Like, all of the kids were rotating through each other's tents, for example. And it wasn't like you were just buddying up in the same tent for the whole time.
It was like a hotel takeover.
It was like everybody was going to different tents. Alex.
Sorry.
You know, and like nobody was getting upset about that. It was just like understood that you were kind of living that way.
That's so cute.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was cute.
Okay, so our last question was, where do you picture yourself in 5 years? What do you think about what you meant by that then and where you are now?
Oh, wow. What did I mean by it?
I'm pretty sure I was like, we will not still be poly in 5 years. I will have collected enough material to write my memoir, and I will be on my way to writing my memoir, which, joke's on me, still poly, just had my book rejected last week by a publisher. So gotta just keep getting out there. More material.
Every
what do you
no
think about-
gets you closer to a yes.
Except in consent situations.
Except in consent situations, in which case, the first no you should just listen to and walk away.
Yes.
So where do you think we'll be in 5 years from now?
Whoa.
Well, I don't know. I have been thinking about that a lot. I mean, I guess for obvious reasons, because we're at the anniversary. One reflection that I was having kind of as we were talking and in the context of the world and politics is I think a lot of what polyamory has taught me is actually about how I behave in community. It's like, obviously I've learned a lot on the interpersonal level, and I've learned a lot like sexually and romantically, and I've unpacked things about my own attachment and all of that. But if I were just to like in this particular moment be like, what's your biggest takeaway from polyamory in the past 5 years? I think it has taught me to have a higher window of tolerance for discomfort in relationships, for imperfection in relationships, for things to be unresolved, for things to be uncertain. I think prior to this, and it's like kind of hard to inhabit that mindset, but these questions were definitely giving me a little bit of a sense of it again. I really wanted things to be very clear cut. You can see that in my question. I'm just like, I want to know what exactly is happening. I want to know that it's always going to be happening that way. If it's going to change, I want a lot of advance notice, you know? And I think that these 5 years of polyamory have just like taught me that there is constant change. Nothing is ever resolved. There's no one like iteration or permutation of a relationship that then stays fixed. You're at any given time, if you are in big community with people, and that's not just romantically, but just whether it's a giant camping trip for 48 hours, or it's, you know, a protest movement, or it's our chosen family, or it's our polycule, some shit's going down. Something's going wrong. You know, like some hard, difficult, challenging thing is happening. And there's never going to be a moment when all the plates are spinning in the air perfectly. So you need to really just like get more okay with that. And I think there is like a strong political lesson potentially in that as well, that we are never going back to normal. There is never going to be a time where we just get to make these like clear cut and dry little decisions and then smugly live happily ever after. This shit is a fucking mess. And we are in that mess together. And I think that has been like a big lesson of these 5 years, polyamory and beyond for me.
I was planning to be smugly living happily ever after in 5 years. So I guess burst my bubble. I think for me, I don't know if this is answering the question, but I think what I would observe is that I thought that everything would be sort of like not easier necessarily, but less hard. And I think my like arc over that 5 years has not been getting like more comfortable with everything, but in fact kind of getting like less comfortable, or maybe like just sort of more attuned to like how I was feeling. And so for the sort of like front end poly enthusiast, I think that it makes me want to sort of caution that like it's not the optimism or like sort of potential that you're imagining like can be manifest, but you may get to some point where, or like, you know, maybe part of that growth is like finding out that, you know, everything isn't as easy and comfortable and you aren't as comfortable with it as you thought you were.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like in some ways your internal journey has been one of getting more and more in touch with your feelings. And instead of being in this kind of mindset where you're like, everything's good, everything's fine, everything is like potentially utopian, you're like, oh, actually, I feel insecure, or I feel sad, or I feel lost, or I feel...
Or I just actually quantifiably have more dumb feelings now than I did before.
Okay, Jessica and I have known you for a really long time, and I think that we can say with some certainty you've always had dumb feelings.
Oh, thank you.
It was just whether or not you were giving them airtime.
Yeah.
And letting them be cared for.
Maybe in 5 years they'll be more cared for. And I would also imagine if I was going to come back and listen to this in 5 years, like a projection might be that I would have longer, kind of more stable, less chaotic relationships. I think that would be a goal. Like I've kind of churned through a lot of relationships in the last 5 years, and I don't know that I necessarily want to do that.
I would say me too, actually. As you were saying that just like really hit right for me, is that I think my hope for my 5 years down the road self is that, I've learned how to develop poly relationships that have like longer arcs, and there are probably fewer of them, but they are more like meaningfully like integrated into my life. And really like more just a part of my life and community.
Seems age appropriate also.
Yeah, I mean, we're also going to be 50.
Yeah. No, 49.
Well, that year really means a lot to you in this podcast.
Hell yeah. I can still do freaky 49-year-old shit. Okay, well, this was an excellent time machine.
Yeah. Thanks for journeying back to 2020.
Yeah.
And I don't know, here's to 2030.
Wow, that's just
yikes, guys.
What in the future the sign off is going to be like, thanks so much for listening to Mistakes Were Made. Follow us, like program your AI assistant to do a recap of our podcast for you and download it into your Neuralink.
Oh,
if you have feedback for us, just
send us a hologram message.
Yes.
Or the podcast will have been completely re-envisioned to just be about all of the relationships that you have with robots.
Or third option, this podcast will just be carved into the rock walls of a cave.
Honest to God, I'm rooting for that one.
We'll just be standing around a giant bonfire talking to an audience about our relationships.
All right, check back in 5 years and see whose prediction is right.
See you then.
Bye everybody. Thanks.